Wilmer steps in to get this thing underway. And Oakland City, in the dark uniforms, will control the opening tap. Peratt driving, dishes to Talbert, Talbert to the goal.
Man, what a way to start off the game. Talbert with the jam.
Now Foster, ball knocked away. NKU coming up with the steal. Lahan to Conley for the layup. NKU wins.
There's Forbes for Weesaw. That's it. It's there. Set up, shot taken. McNamee saves it. Headed back toward goal. Holder into the back of the net, and the Norse are going to the GLVC tournament final.
64-64. The Norse have a chance to win it right here. Roush will inbound it into Doss. She lays it out. It goes in. And Northern Kentucky at the buzzer will win its first home Division I game, their first ever Division I game. And the hero is Melody Doss.
Lob pass to Glick for the win. Got it! Molly Glick, Northern Kentucky wins.
It's going to come down to this. Here's Warwick off the glass. Bam tips it up twice. It doesn't go in. It counts.
Oh my God.
It counts.
David Bam.
David Bam at the buzzer. And they count it and they swarm him just all right. Incredible.
3-2 on the way, and it's high in the air to left. Going back to the wall. Northern Kentucky wins. Logan Davenport walks it off. It's popped up. Is there room for Maddie Lacer? No, coming in to make the catch is Trinity Robertson, and Northern Kentucky has defeated Michigan.
Vincent gets it across the timeline to Warwick from the logo.
Got it! The birthday boy delivers, and Northern Kentucky is going to walk this one off.
And Northern Kentucky is going to get the rebound, and they're going to win this game in a signature win for the Northern Kentucky basketball program.
Hey, and if you're a Northern Kentucky fan, it is a night to celebrate.
It's hard to believe 30 years have gone by this quickly. What a great walk down memory lane. 30 years of television broadcasting here at Northern Kentucky University. I'm Matt Sexton. Great to be here with two legends of NKU broadcasting. I feel very honored to be in between two people who honestly don't need an introduction, but I will provide one anyway. To my left, the man, the myth, the legend, Don Weber, joining us for this. Don, it's great to get a chance to sit in with you.
Great to be here, Matt, and talking NKU. It was one of my favorite things to do, is cover the Norse back in the day, and so many great memories.
It's just absolutely great to watch that video, and we'll talk about a lot of those memories. And was very fortunate. One of those we heard right at the end. I was fortunate to be sitting alongside the man to my right when he called Marquez Warwick's big three to win the game. Of course, Brady Laber. Brady, great to be back along with you.
Well, Matt, it's always my pleasure to be with you guys, and I've got goosebumps. I don't know if it's because watching some of the great footage or being in the same room again with Don Weber, who I interned under in what was then known as ICN 6, and his show, The Sports Page, and his coverage of the local sports is literally the reason that I wanted to get in this stuff, and I was able to do it at my alma mater. And it's all started in the gym that I would go into the Mike Beitzel basketball camps in, Regents Hall. And to go in there today, it's just an awesome thing, and we get to kind of relive it again, talking about some of these great games. And it as awesome as it is to be in Truist Arena, and it's been a couple different names since it opened 15 years ago, to me, man, the magic happened, or at least it started at Regents Hall, and we're going to get to relive some of that stuff here today.
Absolutely. I think that's where we're going to start as well. I think there is a certain contest against Kentucky Wesleyan that was one of the first things that was discussed. Don, if you could kind of take us back to those early days as the lead up to this 30 years of television, kind of give us a little background on that.
I'll give you a couple years before that. And let's talk about when Kenny Shields was hired to replace Mike Beitzel. Kenny Shields, a highly successful coach. He was at St. Thomas High School initially in Fort Thomas, and then went on to Highlands High School about a year before St. Thomas closed. But then he had great success at Highlands High School, won multiple regions there, and was looked at as really the top high school coach at the time there, and especially through the 80s. in high school basketball in Northern Kentucky, and for that matter, the state of Kentucky. The job opened up when Coach Beitzel left, and then Kenny Shields was hired to be the new head coach. So Kenny comes in, first year, he had a decent team, but still nothing overly spectacular. They were over 500, but still not great. But again, you have a new coach come in. You got, Kenny had to get used to coaching in college and everything else. The next year, there was a senior-dominated team. The next year, a lot of underclassmen on this team, and I think they won 7 or 8 games. Just a terrible season. And, that's one thing I'll always remember about Kenny is the fact that how classy a guy he was, because, and is, he's still around, but, after some of those games, I've had some coaches that have had a lot better seasons than what that season was, kind of don't want to talk to you and are kind of snappy and everything else. Kenny was always so professional with me. And again, we had known each other through when I was covering him at Highlands, but still very much, ready to answer anything, and was really good. Well, I got some information from inside NKU that they were about ready to can him. But it was, they were going to give him another year, but there was talk of, okay, if this program doesn't improve, and there were some people who wanted him gone then because they had fallen off. And you look at NKU's basketball schedules, the records, and it was a tough year. It was a bad year. And but they didn't, and that's when things totally turned around. They turned around, had great seasons. And you always wonder, what if they jumped the gun? What if they listened to the people who said, he can't coach in college, and get rid of him? What the fortunes of NKU would have been, because when he took over in the 94-95 season was the turnaround year. That was the year that NKU had a good group of people. They had, the Paul Cluxtons, LaRon Moore, Shannon Miner. They were loaded, and a lot of other players. I don't want to cut them out, but those were the three as far as from when they came in as freshmen. And it was a magical year because, again, something NKU was not used to, winning the, being near the top in the GLVC all year long. And it so happened that the two biggest rivals and two other toughest teams, the top teams, they played at the end of the year in Regents Hall. The last 2 games of the regular season was Southern Indiana, who, as you remember, was coached by Bruce Pearl, and Kentucky Wesleyan. So Northern had both those teams at home. And so on Thursday night, they played Southern Indiana. My recollection of that game, packed house, absolutely packed house. And Northern wound up winning. It was a close game. Back and forth for a while. Northern eked it out. I can't remember exactly what the final score was, but it was a tight game. Northern survived it, and they won. So at that point, you knew, okay, the worst they were going to finish is second in the GLBC. But you've got Wesleyan coming in. If you beat them, it was a Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock game, because they played the men's games first for a number of doubleheaders that year. So that was a 1 o'clock game, NKU, Kentucky Wesleyan, for all the marbles in the Great Lakes Valley Conference. Now, this was right before the conference tournament started, so there was no GLBC tournament. Well, I got there probably about noon. I knew it was going to be packed. Well, little did I know when I got there, there's already long lines outside Regents Hall. That was my first shot, was all these people waiting to get into Regents Hall for that game. And so, they started letting people in, and it got to the point where fire marshal, no more people can come in. That was as electric of an atmosphere that I ever experienced in Regents Hall, and for that matter, even in the new arena. And a lot of that is it was so Regents Hall was so small, and it was a huge home court advantage, I think, back in the day for NKU, because it was a pit. It was a pit. It was, for the fans, probably one of the most comfortable. You're on those hard bleacher seats, but it was phenomenal that day, and it was a tight game. Back and forth. It goes triple overtime. NKU winds up winning on a last-second shot, 100-99, and it was just you were going to look at some of the video from that game, but as you can see, they were standing all around, and it just one shot after another.
And, of course, keep in mind, too, to piggyback off what you're saying, Don, the GLBC was one of the top conferences in the nation.
They were.
Throughout the entire decade of the 1990s, there was a GLBC team in the Elite Eight, which is Division II's answer to, the Final Four. And I believe, was that not when Southern Indiana was coming off a national championship the year before?
It was. They were the defending national champions. And, it was just, here you get a look at video, and like I say, just the atmosphere. It was electric, and you can just see everybody just packed in there, off the mark, and that was rounding out the clock, and then triple overtime.
And, and it was all done, too, Don, with mostly local players.
It was.
When they brought in LaRon Moore and Reggie Talbert out of Lexington, that was a big deal, right?
That's
because everybody else was, even inside the 275 loop with, guys like you said, plus the Listerman brothers.
That's the way it was, yes.
And that's how it was for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And be able to do that with local guys whose people you knew, whose family you knew.
Yeah.
You talk about the Listerman brothers, Mike Listerman, their dad, part of that,
Coach Shields.
Yeah, there's Coach Shields. That was one of his buddies. And,
my goodness.
What a great, and of course Dave Beaseld's in there, right? He's an assistant coach.
He was, yes.
And that's a court storming, by the way,
That was, and they didn't get fined for that either.
Right.
But yeah, it was phenomenal, and to be there, like I say, that's probably the number one game that stands out as far as my coverage in covering NKU. Just the whole day, the electric, from arriving there and seeing that long line to get in. And a lot of people didn't get in. They were outside, and at that point, they couldn't watch the game because there was no TV. That was and that was one of the things, I think, back when they were talking about doing TV, of doing it, because after that, you could go somewhere, the University Center, wherever, and you could watch that game. So it was, like I say, it was a great time. What made that time so special was the fact that NKU had gone somewhere they'd never been before. Again, this was the GLBC, the equivalent today of maybe the Big 12, the SEC in basketball. They were the top league in Division II. Multiple national champions won by Wesleyan and Southern Indiana. Unfortunately for NKU, while they won that, they won the GLBC. They were the number one seed in the Great Lakes Regional. But there was a requirement back then with the NCAA that they had to have a minimum capacity, which Regents Hall did not have. So they had to move the Great Lakes Regional to what it was called at the time, the Riverfront Coliseum. So basically a very neutral site, as it turned out, because it's so big, and you get 3,000 people, 4,000 people in Regents Hall. Well, you wouldn't get that many, but it would just, and it really took a lot away. Southern Indiana wound up winning that regional over NKU. And when I look back at that, I just think, what a shame that NKU didn't get a chance to host that year, because while the next 2 years they did win the regional and they went to the national championship game both years, I almost think this team may have been the best of the three. Now, a lot of the same players were on that team, but still, it was disheartening the way it turned out. They wound up having to go to the Riverfront Coliseum. So they didn't have the home court advantage, really. It was taken away from them. And then I think a few years later they took that rule away. So then you could have hosted. So it was a shame, but certainly those were great times, and that was really the game. I think actually both those games, that Southern Indiana and Wesleyan game, was the thought, I'm sure, with NKU of, okay, we've got to put these games on television, because all we had before is kind of what I know Mike Mims, I think that video is probably from Mike Mims, who was the radio, TV, or communication person here at NKU. He shot that because he was shooting alongside me. I was shooting for my show, the Sports Page show. And we had it on the scoreboard that night, so that worked out well. We were able to get that on then. But yeah, it was, so they did that, but then once they started doing the TV games, and it was great for us. We tried to do some games, I think, earlier, but our truck had pretty much died out, the store cable truck. I never will forget the last time we used that truck was at Ludlow for a football game, and we started out with 3 cameras starting out. Wes Wright, I was actually directing that night. Wes Wright, who has done a lot of TV for us over the years back then, he was doing play-by-play. And so normally we always set up a post-game interview. And so he had one with a referee. It was referee in his last game tonight. He was retiring and moving to Florida. So we're watching the game. By halftime, 1 camera had died. We're down to 2 cameras. Then about midway through the third quarter, the second camera died. So we're down to 1 camera for this football game. So the end of the third quarter, Wes is telling me where we're in a break. He said, I've got Bud Moore, the referee, set up for post-game. I go, there's not going to be any post-game, Wes. I said, you may be doing radio play-by-play before it's all said and done. I said, we'll get to the game, and that's it. So we really didn't have the facility or the equipment really to pull that off. So, but it was great when NKU did decide to do that, because I think it's great on a lot of reasons. I think, one, NKU fans could see the games. That was probably the best reason. 2, for the NKU broadcasting students. I would have loved, I may look at it today, I mean, these games are on ESPN now, granted the streaming channels, but still, people could literally watch these around the country, and it's like, gosh, that would have been great to have had the opportunity to do that. Of course, when I was in school here, there was no cable TV, there was no streaming, there wasn't anything. There wasn't internet,
And if you wouldn't know already, Don, you would know that's a student production, even today,
right?
Because it comes across so seamlessly because of guys like Bill Farrow and Wes Akers.
They do a good job, and that's a great point, because I've watched some of the games on the regular ESPN games. They're not as good as some of the productions out here at NKU. And I'm not picking on anybody or anything, but it's the truth. But it's also a credit to the NKU, which is what I've known and what I think all of us have known as far as, the students NKU turns out, they're ready. They're ready to do a good job. And I got to the point where I just wanted exclusively, when I had interns, have NKU interns, because, one, I knew they would be ready to go and they would do a good job, and I was a kind of a one-man band. So last thing I needed to do is babysit an intern, teach them every little thing. But they were all great. But I think that was one thing about this. The kids could have a chance to be part of these productions, and I think it's fabulous. I think it was a great idea. And the rest is history. There's so much history now, sports history, that is preserved at NKU that otherwise maybe wouldn't have been. I mean, I know our channel stopped in 2010, so we wouldn't have had anything past that. But it's great that it's continued and the games are on, and it gives people an option to, watch these games, because that's the key. You want to be visible. If you're not visible, people can forget about you, especially today, especially in this era of streaming. And, you got choices of, I know when cable TV started, you had maybe 25, 30 channels. And now you've got possibilities. You'll be watching 700, 800 things, depending on what kind of services you have. So, but the other thing, local. I think that's the one thing people will never get tired of, is local. And I think that's a great asset for NKU to have, what you guys have done here at NKU.
Yeah, it's been great to watch it evolve, and just watching that opening video and seeing it going from that first game in November of 1995 to what we have going out now. And yeah. Brady, I know you've seen that evolution. What do you think this has done for the sports programs here at Northern Kentucky? Because again, I think people who don't know, maybe younger people that don't realize, like Don just said, it wasn't like there were 500 channels back in 1995. To even get on television was an accomplishment. it had to have raised the whole profile of the entire university and its sports programs once it became a TV product.
Well, and I think it was just one of the many pieces that helped build the foundation to transition into what everybody at the time thought was the ultimate goal, and that is to end up in Division I, and that became a reality in the early 2010s. And without, first of all, facilities, the brand new arena, which is now called Truist Arena, but it was the Bank of Kentucky Center then, and all of the other, and then the soccer stadium came later. If you've got to have the stuff on TV, and then that makes you more attractive to get and be able to go into the Division I ranks. And I think that was just another of the many things. Plus, you had to be good on the field, on the courts, which that was the easiest part, as it turned out, for the athletic department, was the quality of play and the quality of athlete. It was all the other ancillary things that needed to be done to go to Division I, and the television production was basically a big part of that. And it's just hard to believe that it was a student production, right? You had a handful of adults, as I call them, who unfortunately I don't know how I became one of them, but and it gave us all an opportunity to want to break in it. It's hands-on experience. I work with other colleges, and they try to figure out, well, how do I get hands-on experience here at school, because I have to be in school a certain time to be eligible for an internship. Well, you can do it right here on campus. And Don saw some of the stuff what I was doing or other people, and there was no interview process. Don already saw our work, and it was just okay, I have the opening. When can you start? As long as you have the availability, that is, sometime during the even hours.
9 and 3, yeah.
But that is, I mean, the whole television production thing, and of course the cost is where it's effective to have the student production of it. And Bill Farrow's talked about, and you mentioned Mike Mims, of course, Dick Murgatroyd, who was a legend in the television, right? And what Mike Mims came from Channel 9, he brought a bunch of hand-me-down equipment, and that's what those guys worked with, the people like Wes Akers and Bill Farrow and Tracy Purser, whose voice you hear on there now, Steve Hensley. That's what they got to work with. And eventually, with going in Division I, you get better equipment, you get to learn new things. It became HD. I remember that was a big deal. We got that production trailer as opposed to that little ice cream truck that I think is abandoned somewhere here on campus. That's where I got my start, in the truck.
Right.
It was 4 people. I was in the driver's seat with the steering wheel and the small on my back, doing replay of calls of your games over there. I mean, Stephen Wright, that fabulous season he had in 2007, I'll never forget that. Watching those games, that little tiny monitor from Regents Hall, and then to elevate it to a production trailer to now a full-fledged production truck, man. And those are the kind of things that helped elevate this whole entire athletic department into the Division I program it is now.
And Don, what do you remember about those early days as they started TV here, and kind of you got a chance to see the evolution of it as it continued to progress and move toward what would eventually be the Division I era?
Yeah, it was, and I think Division I, it was interesting because, again, NKU came from a situation. I mean, there was a year back in the 90s, I can't remember exactly what year it was, but every one of their teams qualified for the NCAA playoffs. Every program did. Every athletic program did. So they were highly successful, highly, it's kind of weird because on one hand, you kind of think Division I is probably where you needed to go. But in reality, it was, it's different. I mean, because then, the regular season meant a lot. Every week you had the rankings came out. Where are you at in the rankings? Okay, you're second, third, first, And today, the regular season doesn't mean a whole lot. Let's face it. If you're in the one-bid horizon, as some of the other leagues are in the same boat, if you don't win the conference tournament, unless you go maybe undefeated, you're not.
It's the calling card of our current head coach, 3 days in March.
Right.
Right. And then the baseball program took the same mantra a couple of years ago. They said, Dizzy Payton, he said, I stole that from Darren Horn. It's 3 days in March because that's all that matters. So everything's a dress rehearsal for those 3 days in March.
So I miss that, I think, if you look at it. And again, obviously the GLPC was kind of blowing up at the time. There were teams coming in that weren't necessarily in the Great Lakes Valley area where that used to be. So that conference was kind of dropping off. And so you had teams, and you had really most of I think Indianapolis might be the only named team that as far as was a rival with NKU, that's still
I think Lewis
there.
is the other one. Yeah, but all the rest of them have either moved on to other conferences or whatever, because it moved west, as you remember when Missouri S&T and I think it was Missouri Rolla, and it's like, okay, it's starting, and then Rockhurst. So it's like, well, we're going further west, and then at the very end, it was like Truman State, and UIS, Illinois Springfield. It's like, what are we doing here, man?
Well, and I think it was one of those things too. Talking to even the Dr. Late Jim Botruba about Division I. I mean, it was one of those things. I mean, and I think it was the funding for that arena would not have come if NKU did not have plans to go to Division I. I think that was the thing. The lawmakers in Frankfurt, I think, were all right, because again, Northern, it was the size of like EKU, and not the size of Western, but certainly, but bigger than Murray, bigger than Moorhead. So it's like, okay, should have an arena, as much as Regents Hall, classic place, great home court advantage, everything else, but an arena. I always thought like Southern Indiana, where they play, it was about 4,500, 5,000, somewhere like that. I thought that would have been an ideal arena for NKU, but not. I mean, I love where they're at. I love what they've got here, but. So yeah, it was. I think there was some excitement, though. I mean, it was like, okay, and like I say, in hindsight, it wasn't like, okay, NKU left the conference. It was in a great situation in Division II to go Division I. That wasn't the case because the JLBC was changing. But so they did. They went to and the Atlantic Sun was their first conference. And
they were almost in the OVC, and there's a lot of banter about how that
Tennessee schools did not want
or
them
didn't happen exactly. And so, and then look at what happened with that conference.
I know.
They've had a lot of shifting
Eastern's
and movement.
In the OVC.
Eastern,
they're in the Atlantic Sun.
Yeah. So they moved
Bellarmine's
out of
in the Atlantic Sun. So in reality, in hindsight, NKU would have been better off, I think, to have stayed. Wright State is their rival? I know it's their biggest rival.
And they were a rival many years before that. In the early, well, they were a geographic rival. If you look at the records, honestly, Wright State always got the better of Northern Kentucky. Now, Moat Hills pulled out a couple wins here and there that were very, very memorable. But for the most part, even though in the early days of NKU basketball, Wright State was the closest geographic rival. And it was, because they weren't in the GLBC yet. That didn't happen till when, Don? About 1985? Because there was a couple years they went from Division II to NAIA and then back into Division II, and that's when they went into the GLBC.
Correct. They actually went to the NAIA regional final down at Cumberland and wound up losing that game. Wes Wright actually went down there and covered that for us. And I can't remember what year that was, but yeah, that was...
it was early, mid-'80s. I think was Brady Jackson on that team?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, because then the Hairston twins came in right after that, and then they went into... Because they had that huge recruiting class in 85,
that's right.
And I guess in 86 is when they went to the GLBC.
Right. And you get back... There's history with NKU. I mean, there was a time this athletic department almost got totally cut. Now, that was back in the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, that didn't happen. But yeah, they went to the NAIA for a short period of time, as Brady said. And then, but interesting, and talking to Moat Hills, he was the head coach when I was here. He's the first NKU head coach. He was a character. One of the greatest things that I ever did was a friend of mine. I had like 3 hours between classes my senior year out here, and really had taken everything I needed to take. And so I was just going to, just lounge around the TV studio or something for 3 hours. And a friend of mine told me, he goes, Moat's teaching a basketball coaching class. It's 2 hours. You get 2 hours in it. So it's like, okay, I'll do it. You're going to do it. I'll do it. So I signed up for it. And that was one of the most, it was just a fun class to be in, just the way he did stuff. And Moat was a character. That's
saying it lightly.
Yes. A couple examples. One time they went to the regional tournament. Went to an NCAA Division II regional tournament, which they could have hosted.
Yes.
At the time, there was no rule about your gym being too small. So and I think it was Eastern Illinois, I think
you're right.
It was some school in Illinois, I know that.
Right.
And so he was, so NKU was set to host. Well, at the time, Lonnie Davis was the AD, Dr. Lonnie Davis, and he nixed it. He goes, we don't have a facility to host it. So Northern had to go to Illinois as the number 1 seed to be in this tournament.
And keep in mind, that was the year when NKU really, that was when they kind of got on the map. They beat Xavier on TV that year.
Yes,
they had
were
a
good.
bunch of studs on that team. I think that was Dan Dolman, Jeff Stowers.
I was at that game when they beat Xavier.
Yeah, Dennis Bettis. He told us,
Right.
Dennis Bettis, that was the final key.
Yep.
When I finally got the point guard, I already had the scores.
And
I
after
needed a
that
guy
game,
to get him the ball. And
Mo
then
was a graduate of Xavier, and that's another, as far as we're getting way pre 30
Sure.
years. But I was at that game. I went over there with a friend, and it was just electric. Now, I'll admit, Xavier program wasn't back then what it is today.
But it was a name brand for this
they
area.
were still Division I, right?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, getting back, so we're there, and so the story goes, and Mo told me this story, so I believe it. They're getting on the bus. They got a 5-hour bus ride to wherever in Illinois. I think it was Eastern Illinois. That's where he had to go to play this tournament game. So Lonnie Davis gets on the bus too, the AD. Moat's like, get your, you know what, off the bus.
He kicked his own boss off the bus because
His
they
own
wouldn't be
boss had
on.
to drive,
They
yeah.
would not be on that bus if it wasn't for his decision.
That's right.
And then, is it true that when Dr. Lonnie Davis had little 2-seater sports car, his engine blew up on the way as he followed the bus?
He had car issues. I didn't remember that. Yeah.
But remember, Don, I was interning for you, and I know we've gotten way off track here, but when I was interning for you, Don, it was one of the first NKU Hall of Fame inductions that was in what's now known as Truist Arena.
Right.
And you gave me the opportunity to ask the questions where you shot it, and then you kept telling me, now, Moat, he's going to tell this story. I hope he doesn't. This is probably the reason it's taken him so long. They've been afraid of this, but honestly, I think everybody knew he was towards the end of his life. He only lived a few more years after that. So
he was having health issues.
He was, and so they were like, and of course, he's married into the family, right? Is it Kenny's daughter that's married to Moat's son? Kenny Shields' daughter?
Yes,
So it finally got smoothed over. Let's go ahead and give the guy his day. And sure enough, you introduced me to him, and you say, Brady's going to be asking the questions. And before we even start rolling, he says, did I ever tell you that story about when I threw Lonnie Davis off the bus?
He was proud of it.
And then he tells the story in our little B-roll session. Then when he goes and does his induction speech, he tells it again. Much to the chagrin of Jane Meyer, who knew this was going to happen. But but it all happened, so there's no reason, and it was a public record. But but Moat Hills, he started all this. Then it transitioned, to Mike Beitzel to get it to the next level, and Kenny Shields, and then that's what gets us to 96. And that's when these games were the timing of getting these games on TV. When it comes down to that back-to-back run to the national championship game and being on CBS, and you were able to see those regular season games and some of the players that they went up against. The one year it was Kibu Stewart, who was at Cal State Bakersfield at the time. He had transferred in from UNLV. He was a legit dude. And Ben Wallace was Virginia Union, another legit dude that won, an NBA championship. I mean, it was just, and then there's there's Shannon Miner, and there's the Listerman brothers, and Paul Cluxton didn't miss a free throw the whole season, and they were right there.
They
did.
Right there with them,
and there were times where it looked like LaRon Moore was the best player of all of them.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, and I still think that team, especially those couple years there, might still be the best team in NKU history. Because here's the deal: you say, "Oh, Don, that was the Division II team," but no, they had players who could have played at mid-major if they wanted to, but they stayed close to home. They stayed close to home, and then they were able. If you remember back then, they were able to fill in holes with D1 players. Because back then the rule was, if you're a D1 player, if you wanted to transfer to another D1 school, you had to sit out a year. So most of the players, they don't want to sit out a year. They wind up signing with a D2 school, and some of the best recipients of that were Kentucky Wesleyan, Southern Indiana, and NKU.
Yeah, and NKU was kind of late to that game.
They were,
as far as that goes. I don't think Kenny was really in on that right away. I know when Bees took over for him, he was a big part of that. Stephen Wright was the main one it started with
from Bowling Green, transferred from Bowling Green his senior year.
He was special. He probably to this day still has the best singular season in the history of NKU men's basketball for sure.
They were great.
I'll argue that with anybody.
Oh no, and everybody saw him play. I don't know how they could.
All-American, GLVC Player of the Year. He was a legit dude. Played 15 years in the pro ranks.
He was fantastic. So I think as far as a player coming in for a year from a D1 school, I think Stephen Wright's at the top of the list for NKU. I mean, there have been some good ones.
And then later on, you could argue guys like Drew McDonald and Marquez Work as far as that singular season, though, that lightning in the bottle.
Right.
Boy, I tell you what, it's tough to overcome what Stephen Wright did.
Yeah, and it's great that they were able to do that. The other thing I do miss, though, today is a lot of the players, you don't see them their whole time in college. They go somewhere else.
Especially now.
Yeah, and it may be yearly. You've got guys, I think, that are 4 or 5 different schools in 5 years, you know what I mean? So I think that was always kind of neat because, somebody comes in as a freshman, they don't play a lot, Sophomore, you see them, they get better. Junior, my goodness. Senior, and it was so neat to see. That was one of the great things I loved about college basketball was you just saw these players evolving, just get better and better and better. Now, if you don't play as a freshman, they're gone. They're going to go somewhere else. So that's one of the unfortunate things that's happened. We've not seen the full ramifications of the NIL thing, in my opinion. And I think for schools like in the Horizon and in the Atlantic Sun and some of these other mid-level conferences, I don't know. I've heard everything from, do these schools one day go to non-scholarship because you're not going to be able to compete? Does it become a separate division, which I wouldn't be opposed to? But I don't know that'll happen. Like football, basically where you're Division I, maybe one AA, but you would play for national titles. You would play for something because at this point, NKU is not going to win a national title. Schools in that Horizon aren't going to win the national title. And everybody throws out Butler, but that was a while back, and that was under a whole different set of circumstances too.
Yeah, but now if you get in and just win a game, that is your national championship.
Like a national championship.
Just like Oakland did. And even if you're just in the play-in game.
Right.
Like Wright State won a game.
Right.
Everybody's like, well, why would you want to go to the play-in game? I'm like, because you have a chance to win, and it's always on your resume, and you get TV shares for 2 games and not just 1. Who cares when it is? I always
prayed when NKU got into the tournament that they would be in the play-in game up at Dayton because what a great crowd NKU would take up there. And for the same reason you're saying, Brady, because it's like it's going to be one, but what that would make a program, and I mean for Wright State, they had to love that. They're basically in their hometown, basically hosting a playoff game at the University of Dayton Arena.
Both times NKU went in the modern era here, it was they were almost too good to be put into that play-in game, and they probably the tournament that was canceled. Right, the 2020 that they were in, right?
It wasn't. They won it. They won the tournament. Yeah.
So they were in. They were a participant of a tournament that didn't happen. But that was probably the team that had the best chance to get in that play-in game because they weren't so good. They were going to be a 14 or a 15 seed like those other 2 teams were and put a scare into a number 1 or 2 seed. Instead, they kind of just backed in, but you know what? They're good enough to go and win a game up in Dayton. Yeah. And then you never know what happens after that. There's been teams that got out of that play-in game. VCU went to the Final Four out of the play-in game. With guys that John Brannon helped recruit, by the way, as it all comes back to NKU.
Yeah. Well, who was it? UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County beats Virginia by 20.
Yeah.
1 seed that won the play-in
goes to
16. So
that's right.
It can happen, I guess. But yeah, it's I just look at NKU and and it's like there's a lot of great memories, no doubt. I think another game that really stands out in Regents Hall was Kenny Shields' last game there as head coach. They played Lewis, Saturday afternoon game, and I never will forget the look on. They were doing like pregame stuff and everything. I never forget the look on Lewis's head coach's face because you could just see on his face and Lewis was a very good team that year. They won the GLBC pretty handily. NKU was kind of up and down. And you could see the look on his face like, we don't have a chance today. And it wound up going to overtime.
It was triple overtime.
Yes, triple overtime. That was another
I had to research that to see when was the last time a year ago. I had to research when was the last triple overtime game we had, and I was like, wow, it went back that far. And then I was like, wait a minute, that might have been Kenny's last game at Regions Hall.
Oh, it was unreal, and but I never forget the look on his face because it was just almost kind of like, we're in trouble, but it was a great game. I mean, no doubt, but a lot of emotion, obviously, and and that was the local connection too. I mean, that was the thing with NKU. I mean, you start out with Moat Hills. He came from Cath. And then you had Mike Beitzel, who was not really from Northern Kentucky, and then you had Kenny Shields replacing him. And then Bees came in and replaced.
Yeah, Dave Beasold, the handpicked successor to Kenny, and that wasn't a sure thing that was going to happen there.
Right. And I don't know. I felt like he should have been given a little more time. But I mean, there's people that disagree with that, but basically he was there for that
4-year transition,
that purgatory time where you're not eligible for anything.
And the worst thing is he did well at the end of that 4th year, enough to make it awkward to ask him to leave.
Yeah. So I wasn't real happy with that. Then they hired John Brandon. Of course, John, I covered him in high school.
Another local guy.
Central Catholic, another local guy. So, and I think that was one of the things that really helped NKU is they had local guys. They had local guys on the team, and that's kind of changed now, but not fully, but it has. And then, of course, you got the current coach, but it's
Darren Horn, by the way.
Yeah,
shout out Darren Horn, Lexington, Kentucky.
That's right. So he's not totally.
And I'll give you
outside.
a tie as far as locally for him. He played at Western Kentucky. Darren Horn did.
Yep.
And you know who one of his teammates was?
Who's that?
Jack Jennings.
Oh, from Holmes High School.
Bingo.
Big Jack.
Big Jack, yeah.
Big Jack.
He was something else. Boy, he was special.
He was, man.
He was a miniature Charles Barkley, probably about 6'4", and he just backed you down in the first row.
He was.
Was it the region semifinals? He scored 69 points at Campbell County against Newport Central Catholic. And I just remember Bob Jones, Campbell County was going to play him in the finals.
And I covered that game,
And Coach Jones said, no way Bingo's going to go for 69 against us. And like one of the first plays of the game, Eric Russell, who ended up, was a classmate of mine, but ended up being a longtime head coach at Campbell County. Most successful.
Most wins in history,
he takes an elbow from Jack right in the face, blood everywhere. He scores his first bucket, but that was kind of intuitive of what was going to happen. Is it was just going to get packed in. I think Jack had 10 points that game, but he just pounced it out.
69-51 was that final.
Yeah. And he just, one of the Pouncy boys, I don't know which one it was, whether it's Herb or Alfonso, whichever one, and that guy got 30. And Jack got 10, and we get rebound. He might have had 30 assists.
Yeah, and that was at Campbell County. That was at the middle school, which was
now
high school back then.
But Darren Horn was a teammate.
Wow, okay.
So that's one of the first times I kind of got Darren Horn to, warm up to me, right? It's like, hey, man, Western,
not really
huh?
Any dealings with Darren.
But that was when he realized, okay, so he knows some people, because he's one of them guys, he's all business, man.
Right.
I mean, with a guy like John, I knew him growing up.
Right.
He's all business too, but he couldn't deny that, we was playing in open gyms at St. Mary's when we were in 7th grade or whatever, so he kind of knew who I was, and Darren didn't have any idea, and so those are those little things, and it's all this whole regionalized thing, of growing up here in Northern Kentucky and learning, being under the learning tree of guys like Don Weber. And I just always, even, growing up, listening to the old timers, because like my dad, talk about Kenny Shields at St. Thomas, his first year as a teacher, as a freshman biology teacher, my dad was in his class. And you know who else was his teacher? Was Kenny Shields' assistant coach, Dick Maley.
Yeah,
who, of course, his grandson Luke played for the Reds. His other grandson, Michael Mayer, plays for the Raiders right now. And it's just all those intertwining stories. And it seems like the NKU community just thrives off that kind of stuff. And that's what I think makes NKU so special, because so many people have spent time at NKU, whether it be attending it, playing it, watching it, and this TV program has been a big part of it for 30 years. Hard to believe that.
Right. And, let's face it. I mean, for me, NKU is a program I've known from the start. I listened to Dale McMillan, the late Dale McMillan, broadcasting their first basketball game back in 1971 at Newport High School's old gym. Mm-hmm. I had a nickname for that place. I can't think what it was called. But anyway, it was... so they played Calvary and won 109-65. But, so I listened to those games, and you had, people like Dan Dolman just by the late in the 70s. But, when I went to school there, you had players like that. And, but it was, it's interesting to see how this program has evolved. And now there's so much history under it now, whereas obviously when I was going to school there, it was still a relatively new program. And but now, this program is over 50 years old.
Yeah.
And it's, and you look at, they went from playing in Regents Hall to this.
Well, they went from playing in high school gyms to Regents Hall.
Right.
That was a big deal when we went to Regents Hall.
That's right. Because they played at Newport. I know they played at Campbell County. They were
at Ludlow, right?
I think
so. Benny Cleary got them into Ludlow for a while.
Right.
Those first season or two.
Right. Until Regents Hall was built. So that's right. They did not have a home gym here on campus. So they basically went to high schools when it started. So, I mean, you look at it now, you think, oh, there's no way, but that's the way it was,
Humble beginnings.
Yeah.
Now here we're at it, on ESPN, going to the NCAA tournament, and
you've
like
got
I said,
9,400, 9,300 seat arena.
That's right.
I mean, you'd have been like, wow. If you turn the clock forward back in the 70s to now.
Just to see the NKU scroll on, you're watching
all
ESPN. The games are scrolling. You get to see their score.
They're included,
and it's been benefited by the women as well. Matt, you call the women's games, and a couple of those are part of our, little highlight open there.
Right.
I mean, and that was all, let's face it, that was all Nancy Wenstall who got that.
I think when you
Jane Meyer laid some great work, obviously.
Yes.
But it was a wizard, right?
And Nancy
2 national championships.
Yeah, and Nancy was so neat. Because she was about a year ahead of me at Northern. So I actually, when I was a student, saw her play at NKU. So, she's a nice, good player, And so that's how I knew her first. I really didn't know her personally in college. It was more when I became a reporter. But, she's great.
Yeah.
She was always so great to work with. And just teams were so consistent. And that was the thing. While the men may have struggled, the women really kind of carried the load for NKU for a while.
How many Elite Eights did they go to before they finally made? I know 83 or 84. Melissa Wood. Everybody
they went
talks
on
about
86, 87.
That might have been the year. Yeah, Melissa Wood was probably the first really great standout player they had.
Yeah.
And then of course, as it got rolling, there was a little bit of a down trek in the 90s, and then they climbed back up towards the end of the decade, and then 2000 with. Michelle Cottrell and her group, Katie Kelsey and Michelle Tukfarber, and so many other ones, obviously. But that 2000 national championship, they
oh my goodness,
that was something else.
That was. It was so great, and it's funny you say that because they, up till the mid 90s. They were the program. They were the ones that they used to have those classic battles with St. Joe's, which is now a school that's out of business.
Yeah,
but they were. That was a great. They'd have those great matchups. But the men had those runs, and then when the men kind of fell back a little bit in the late 90s, the women took over, won the national championship in 2000. They did go to a final and lost one. I'm trying to think what year that was.
Maybe that was 03,
I think
04?
So. That's what 03
was that Sherelle Snarden? Was she because she only played here for a brief time, but a very, very talented player.
Right. Well, and I never forget this. I went up to cover a regional up at the University of Indianapolis. The regional was up there. NKU was playing. It might have been Grand Valley, I think, in the final. And we were doing scoreboard show that night, but I assumed I wouldn't get back. So I'm covering the first half of that game. Halftime score, Grand Valley 36. It may not have been Grand Valley. I can't remember. Lewis, I can't remember. 36-21. Northern was down 15 points. So I'm thinking, all right, I could conceivably drive back, throw a couple highlights on. I mean, there's not much to talk about and be done. Thank God I didn't do that.
Yes.
Because it's kind of like, you know what? No, it's not worth it. I said, I'll, especially come back and show highlights of them getting blown out. It's not, it had got, I said, I'll just stay, get my post game. We'll stay and do that. And thank God I didn't do that. NKU came from 15 down to win that game and won the regional, so I would have missed out on all that. Oh, that would have not been good. But I mean, they played so poorly in the first half. Because I remember sitting at the table at halftime with Don Owen, Rick Myers, and we're just kind of, I think Chris Cole might have been there too, and we're just sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, this team just doesn't even look like NKU.
And that's kind of, no offense, they know who they are. They're kind of the doom and gloom crew, right? I mean, they're expecting the worst case scenario.
Right.
And then be surprised when that happens.
Oh, yeah, and I even said something to them, but I was like, you know what, I'm not. I said, I'm staying because I'm going to stay and get the second half, get the interviews. Now that I think they'd come back and win, no, probably not. Not probably. I didn't think they would. I mean, if you just saw the first half, how bad it was, and then, but the second half, they came to life, and it was unbelievable. They came back, won that game, and I think Snarden was hurt. That was the other issue. So one of their top players was out, so you think, well, this is it, And they came back and won. That might go down to me as one of the more memorable. I mean, obviously the 2 national championship games are probably the tops, but that one's right there too, because that was one that my goodness, I mean, they you just thought, gosh, how'd they come from, playing so poorly in the first half to come back and you get that second half. But yeah, the women, I mean, so many good players coming in.
And that second national championship team in 2008, the final year of Regents Hall, I was working with you at the time.
Yeah.
How unlikely was that? Because everyone thought they were going to win it the year before.
Right.
But key injury to Carmen Graham, a senior best player in the conference.
That's right. Yep.
She missed a large chunk of the season.
Correct.
And it was such a disappointment.
Yeah.
And then they had 2 starters return and then a bunch of newcomers to fill in. That was Angela Healy and Nicole Quixote, 2 local players.
2 local players,
Newport Central Catholic's all-time leading scorer, and Highland's best soccer player, right?
That's right.
Angela Healy. And it was something else. They went... Drury hosted the GLBC that year.
Right.
They lose in the finals to Drury, and then Drury gets picked as the regional host, and they got to go back down there the next weekend and end up beating Drury in I think it was the semifinals or quarterfinals, however that's determined. And then they go and win pretty easily there in the regional championship to go to the Elite Eight.
And they went to the Elite Eight. Did they run into Alaska? Was that the year they played Alaska Anchorage?
Alaska Anchorage was, in the Final Four. That was that year. That was in 2008.
Semifinal.
That was in Kearney, Nebraska.
Yep.
I'm surprised you didn't make that trip, or did you?
I didn't, no, because the NCAA, the organization that stands for No Clue at All.
Oh, my. We're still trying to work for them, by the way, so I didn't say that.
I said it, so, I'll stand by what I said.
That's right.
That opinion does not represent
the
opinions here at Northern Kentucky University.
That's right.
Or these gentlemen right here.
That's okay.
Anyway.
I'm not saying you're wrong either.
They wouldn't let us shoot. They wouldn't let us shoot the games. So
that's right.
It came down to, well, why? Because I actually had somebody, Barry Connolly was one of our news guys.
Yeah.
He moved to Nebraska, so he was living out there, so he could easily get it. And but they wouldn't let us do it, so we did wind up getting the recordings of all the games, and then we wound up doing a Norse report, obviously with Nancy and the players. So we welcome, had the thing where we welcome them home and all that. So we did have that. Ironically, the 2 national championship games, I did not make either one of those, because in 2000, I wound up my son Noah. My wife was 8 months pregnant with him, so it's like, okay, there's still another month, but if I go, she's going to deliver this baby while I'm in the Pine Bluff, Arkansas, is where it was that year.
Yes.
So it's like, all right, well, and I had Cowan's.
Julie Cowens.
Julie Cowens.
Yeah.
Her brother was going. So it's like, I gave him a camera. it was a smaller camera, to get highlights. I said, and he was all set to do it, So he's there. So we get to the first game, and so one of the representatives of the No Clue at All organization wouldn't let him shoot the game. They were like, that's not a professional camera, because the cameras were bigger normally. But it's like, what's going on, So we wouldn't let him shoot. So he didn't get anything from that first game. So I called the No Clue at All organization the next day and talked to the representative there, and I was like, hey, I've got to stay here. My wife's could have this baby any day now. He was the person that I am having do these games. And so they let him do it. So he was able to get the semifinals. The finals you couldn't shoot because they were on live.
Yeah.
So, but we recorded it.
Sure.
But he got all the post-game stuff, and it worked out. But yeah, that was memorable. Like you say, everybody thought it was going to be the year before, wound up being the year after.
Because that senior class was pretty good.
They were. They were really
Carmen
good.
Graham, who's now the head coach at Olentangy Orange High School.
That's right.
And of course, I shouldn't start naming their names if I'm not going to remember them all. But yeah, that was a group. I think there were 4 or 5 of those seniors, and 3 of them were starters. Very good.
They were good, and it was 2 national championships.
Yeah. Karen Krieger, Katie Butler. Does that sound right?
I think so.
Okay.
I think those were the 2, yeah. And then you had, you talk about success. There was a ton of success at Division II, and that's the thing I probably miss about being Division I, because that's lost now. And, you could argue, for me personally, I liked working during that era because there was so much to cover. There were so many championships to talk about, regionals and conference championships and things. So, but time moves on. We all knew that. And but I think it's going to be interesting because, like I say, this NIL thing, I don't think we've seen the full ramifications of that. What's going to transpire? I think there could be some named schools that it may be too rich for their blood. So it'll be interesting. What winds up happening? You keep hearing in football that these top football schools are going to go off on their own. They're going to leave the NCAA. Don't know if that can really happen or not, or if it's going to happen. But
and football is what's controlling all this.
No, it is. Well, and that's the thing. If you sue the NCAA, I think they're winless in court decisions. So that's another issue of, okay, we'll just turn around and sue you, and that'll be the end of it. So, that resulted in all this as far as, being able to pay the players, which I'm not really opposed. I think it was silly, though. Like if if Brady, you were a player and some business or something wanted you to sign autographs or something, and if you took money for that, that was an NCAA violation.
Right.
Well, it's like,
there's nothing wrong with NIL. It's the pay for play, which are 2 different things.
Right. Exactly.
And that's what it's turned into.
That's what it's turned into. Right.
But yeah, the NIL, the name, image, and likeness, you should have control of that. You should have always profited from the fact that people sold jerseys with your name and your number on it.
Exactly.
But the just putting money in your Venmo account and now you're on campus. That's where it's not supposed to make sense, but that's what it, and it's because there's no rules, and we got to figure that out.
What you have, not at Northern and not at schools really in Horizon, but what you had before at these top schools like Kentucky, like Louisville, like North Carolina, Duke, you had these schools making mega $1 million off these players. The schools are getting rich, the coaches are getting rich, everybody's getting rich, except the players aren't getting anything. And I think that's the thing. It was so one-sided that, it was time that needed to change. And I agree with you, Brady. The NIL, nothing wrong with that. I think where you're getting the pay to play now. This is the thing, I think, the full ramifications of that we've not seen yet. And I don't know, especially for schools that are in these, the Atlantic Sun, the Horizon, these mid-major conferences, what the ramifications will be, and I don't think we can even say right now what they're going to be. I think it's still to be determined, but I guess everything will survive. But it's going to be interesting, I think.
Because if you look at the Horizon League all-league team, first team, last 2, maybe even 3 years, all those folks moved on that had eligibility to Power 5 conference schools, and made some pretty decent money doing that. And some of them did it by Marquez Work left here.
I know,
with a college degree.
Right.
He was here 4 years.
Right.
He became the all-time leading scorer.
Right.
He walked out of here with a degree, and he still had a year of eligibility remaining. If he was your son or daughter, would you tell him not to do that?
No, I'd say go to Missouri. Yeah.
You got to go do it.
Yeah.
And bless his heart, and guess what he does? He comes back here. You know, when he comes back to work out in the offseason, he comes here.
Right,
He
right.
doesn't go to Missouri.
Well, this is his school, yeah.
That's right.
This is his school. He got his paycheck at Missouri and then came back
And it
here.
isn't just him. Even before then with Jalen Tate and guys like that, you know, that left here with a year left, they left with a degree.
Right.
That was the mission.
Right. Well, we had a player in back in the 90s, you remember Todd Svoboda.
Absolutely.
He had a dual degree where he had to go to UK his last 2 years. So he played at NKU 3 years and then played his 4th year at UK. And,
As a walk-on.
Yeah, as a walk-on.
He went from being an all-GLBC player. He was probably Kenny's best player.
Oh, yeah.
Kenny probably broke down and cried when he was
I'm
given
sure
the
he did.
news.
I'm sure he
And then he
did.
goes and he becomes, you know, because he's this super tall, super white. I think he had goggles, kind of awkward.
Yeah.
And they put him in the end of the game, and then he just knocked down a 3.
Right.
Well, he became a celebrity for doing that stuff.
No
Talk
doubt.
about NIL opportunities
Oh,
for
yeah.
him in Lexington.
Right,
And,
right.
you know, that was a team, if he comes back for that senior year,
I know it.
that is,
I know it.
that would have been something
but
else.
That was almost an introduction to what we're going to be facing, though, in the future, I think. I really do. I think, you know, if you have a player go through NKU all 4 years, be very thankful for that because, you know, it's probably not, especially if they're a star player, because as Brady said, there's going to be more money somewhere else. And, you know, I think that's going to be the thing because, like I say, that's the thing I enjoyed most about college. One of the things I enjoyed most about college basketball is the fact you watch these kids get better, you know. Man, he wasn't much as a freshman, but when you see him as a senior, gosh, look how
But
far
the
he's
great
come.
thing is what I just looked at is I celebrated it. Like Jalen Tate goes to Arkansas for a year, they
Right.
go in the Elite 8.
Right.
Guess
Oh,
what
yeah.
they always say? A transfer from Northern Kentucky.
True, yeah. Hopefully that
Marquez
can get you
Ward
some-
goes
yeah.
to Missouri. They have a really great year after a bounce
Right.
back year with a head coach that also came from the Horizon League, by the way.
Right.
And Dennis Gates.
Right, right. No.
Where
no,
did he
no
come
doubt.
from? They came from NKU. They came to, you know, the Horizon League, and it all, you know, and so many people were actually able to watch it on these games over the past 30 years.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt.
Well, and we're seeing it on the women's side now. Carter McRae wins Horizon League Freshman of the Year and then moves on to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
the men's game has been there for a while. The money is now starting to show up on the women's side as
Right.
well. So we're going to see that become, you know, I've talked to Jeff Hans, speaking of another local guy starting his run
Who had
back here.
2 stints as an assistant coach here at
Correct.
NKU
Right.
under the Wizard, Nancy
I remember
Winston.
her. Yeah, absolutely.
But he discusses the challenges now recruiting on the women's side and the things that we've heard the men's coaches say for the last 5 to 10 years. We're now starting to see it on the women's side. In fact, Cleveland State, you know, all the success, all the great players they had, about half their team took off and left. Destiny Leo, of course, goes to UNLV. So, I mean, it's something that even at the mid-major level now in the women's game, we're starting to see as well.
I had a volleyball coach in the Horizon League tell me when I sat in for you when you were on special assignment, another Kenny Shields trademark statement that I just borrowed. He said, you know, the 2 things you never want to have is the player of the year and a first-team all-league player because they're going to be gone.
That's true. That's true, unfortunately.
But it's still fun to watch them and say, I remember when they were on
Yeah.
the Norse Media Services
That's
production
right.
of NKU
That's right.
basketball,
No.
even as an opposing player.
Huge asset for this university, Norse Media, I think. And really, like I say, and I mean that sincerely because, I mean, as a student, gosh, what an opportunity. And I would have given anything to have had that opportunity. Of course, different era, but that is a great opportunity. I think a great selling point for students maybe interested in going into radio, TV, to come to NKU because, as you say, Brady, you don't have to wait till your junior or senior year to intern. You can work on these games as a freshman, you know? So,
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of the top moments when we've all had the headsets on over the years. Don, we'll start with you. Your time back broadcasting for NKU, what are some of the games that stand out to you?
The number one was that Wesleyan game, the triple overtime game where they won their first GLBC title. I would say the second one probably was Kenny Shields' last game. It was just so emotional. You know, it was packed. A lot of tears that day, and then another triple overtime game, you know. And then you had the Southern Indiana game. But there were some battles. I mean, Indianapolis would come in. There were some great battles with them, and some NKU didn't win, but they were just so tight. Bellarmine was another one that they came in, and it would just be a real battle. So those were the big ones. I think for the women, I know St. Joe's and NKU had some huge battles, and I was sorry to see that St. Joe's actually had to shut down because that was they were Division II power in women's basketball. But they played some memorable games, but not only at Regents Hall, but up at St. Joe's too. And they were kind of the class of the league back then. But as far as the women, the regionals, winning those, that was always a big deal. But yeah, I mean, there were some great games. I mean, but I would say those for the men would be the top three that I remember covering. It's like I'll never forget those games. Just the atmosphere, even more so than covering those national championship games, because again, you're in a big facility. Obviously, the prize is bigger in those games, but the atmosphere of maybe if NKU had won those two games, it'd be different. But still, it was a lot of great memories to me with NKU basketball. Covered high school too, but obviously NKU was a big thrill. Being an alum, I think, added to that to kind of see the evolution of this program to go from being kind of an average team for the most part to being one that's ranked highly, top 5 in the country, in Division II. So that was great. That was great. And I know then you saw the transition when they went from Division II to Division I, how that was special. But again, I think part of that, while there's some great games, a lot of the games we had the highlights of were kind of past my time as far as covering those games. Because I didn't get to quite as many once I quit doing the Norse report, because I had to do the high school stuff too. So, and I didn't have as much help, so I had to kind of pick and choose more than once I had to commit. When I was doing the Norse report, I went to every NKU game, including a lot of the away games, and then I usually had somebody else get into the high school games. So it was, but yeah, it was great. It was great, and I enjoyed it. And I always said, those games I was working, but didn't feel like I was working. I'm sure you feel the same way.
Absolutely. It's hard to believe they give you money to do this stuff, right?
That's exactly right.
And I've even been asked, do they pay you to do that? I was like, well, as much as I'd probably do it for free, don't tell anybody.
Don't let anybody know that.
Because, yes, I still have to pay the bills.
It's fun, yeah.
But, I had a ton of them, too. Obviously, now in the more quote-unquote modern era, only because it was Division I. But I think the first really aha moment was when West Virginia came to town with Bob Huggins, which was a personal favor to his, what everybody thought was going to be his son-in-law, Kevin Chappelle, one of the assistant coaches. Mm-hmm. And he came in and just let NKU host his team, right? And he got to come back to Cincinnati and hang out for a weekend, which was a big deal, obviously. But just that kind of gave NKU some credibility as a Division I, because you knew they were going to play some of those teams, but you always were going to have to go to their place. But this was the first time that one of those name brands came in here as the visiting team. Of course, West Virginia got a big win, but it was really cool. That was kind of an aha moment as far as, okay, this Division I thing is real. Mm-hmm. So that was a big moment. Wasn't really an exciting game, but just the fact that that was happening, and the circusry that was a Bob Huggins shoot around, because all of his buddies and all these local media people that never usually come around were there. A lot of the other ones we saw in the open, David Bam, that was hosting a Horizon League quarterfinal tournament game in the empty arena. That was the COVID season. Yeah. That was a bizarre time that I hope never comes back. Yeah. And but that was a great, 3 tips, and it finally goes in at the buzzer. And that was, of course, that led Sports Center. That was Scott Van Pelt's the best thing I saw today. Mm-hmm. That was a great one. Drew McDonald. He scored 30 points in the first half against Cleveland State, and I'm sure I've even asked him this because he's become a teammate now on our productions and a friend as well. And of course I knew him when he was a little kid. His mom played here, and I remember those days when she was the head coach at Newport Central Catholic on the girls' side, coaching Nicole Quixote among other greats. And, he said, yeah, man, I just knew I couldn't miss that day. The worst thing that happened was halftime because I think he scored like 4 more points the rest of the game. He had 30 in the first half. He had a lot of great moments. And then Tyler Sharp had a game where I think he had 9 3-pointers again, couldn't miss. But then there's the Marquez Warwick category. I can't just have one game with that guy because he provided so many of them that were fantastic. I can think of course, he was part of the team when they beat UC, first ever name brand that they beat at NKU, the Storm the Court. That was all fantastic. But Quez, he scored 45 points in, I think, a double overtime game against Tennessee Tech, including a jumper from the hash mark that decided the game. It wasn't a last second, but it was pretty close. There was the one on his birthday they showed. That was his 21st birthday. And I remember you said something to the effect that never seems to get to the annals of time, but you said some people can't remember their 21st birthday. Marquez Warwick will never forget his.
That's for sure.
And it was because he hit that shot at the buzzer against Cleveland State. And then, of course, when he did break the scoring record, which Drew McDonald, when he broke the scoring record, it was on the road. So it was awesome and everything, but I didn't get to call that game. And it was only, I think, 3 years later that Quez took over from Drew as the all-time leading scorer. And just the anticipation. It was a season-long march to get there. And when he finally got there, it was on free throws. He needed 3 points, and he got fouled on a three-pointer, and he was hunting his shot. I mean, we all knew it. He gets fouled, and he makes the first one. Okay, it can happen in this trip, and then he ties it with the second one, and then that's when everybody's on their feet with their phones. Pin drop. You could hear it like it was an echo chamber, and he makes that third one, and the place just explodes, man. It was just amazing. And then interviewing him after the game with tears rolling down his eyes, it made me choke up talking to him because of how special it was, because it was a goal that he had set, and he accomplished it, and it was so fantastic. He had one of the greatest parents, single mom. His dad lived in Belize, so raised by his mom in Lexington, and she was the most supportive parent. Of all the nightmare parent stories you hear, complete opposite, right? Tree's right, one of the greatest of all time, and still to this day we'll follow NKU and chime in and congratulations Norse and all that kind of stuff. So to kind of have that be a part of it, and then just for comedic purposes, another guy we're working with, David Wassler, he's the walk-on, kind of like Todd Swoboda was at NKU. He's the victory cigar. And he didn't get in as much as Svoboda did, but people would chant his name, and Darren Horn would be like, why are they chanting David Wassler? He had a crew of groupies, I guess, that just the Section 110 crowd, right? They just were ate up with him for some reason. I mean, he's 6'10", 6'11", never plays. And when he does get in, it's clearly when the game is in hand, so they drew up a play for him, and he had this slingshot three-pointer that he shoots from down here, and it's just nothing from net. And I stole a line from a guy by the name of Jim Cornette, and if you know, you know. And I said, and the babies are tossed into the air. They're so excited. And that thing gets replayed, it seems like, more than it should. And I hope it's more because of Wassler than my call. But now I'm working together with him as well. So, yeah, those are all the kind of the ones. And there's probably many, many more that deserve to be mentioned. But I know we've ran well over time. But as far as the memorable ones, and don't forget the Melanie Doss one. I mean, most of them were in the open. But that was the first Division I victory for the women's program.
Yeah,
and that was very special. And Melody Doss, who turned out to be a great player, she was a freshman role player at the time. She wasn't even a starter. She was just out there at the end of the game, and she found herself wide open, probably because she wasn't on their scouting report. And she's just wide open in the middle of the paint, and then Christine Roush finds her, and boom, it's in, and it's nothing but the shouting after that.
Youngstown State probably doesn't want to see like a game come down to the wire in that building.
Was that Youngstown State when you got the call against Molly Glick?
It was. Molly Glick hit the three in what was otherwise a pretty rough season.
Yeah, the highlight of the Cameron Whitaker era, probably, right?
It was up there. It was a tough stretch, but it does feel like bringing Jeff Hands in. I think we're going to have more of those great moments going forward. Really excited for what his group has.
And Jeff's not a local guy originally, but he spent so much time in this area. And that was a guy that early in his career was a job hopper, you know? I mean, he was going from place to place to place, but then when he went to Thomas More and stayed there for, I think it was 14 seasons, won 4 national championships. I know the record probably only says 3, but I watched him win 4 of them.
4, yeah.
But and that was the first 3 were on the Division III level.
Yeah.
Of course, you get gifted an elite athlete in Sidney Moss, that'll happen. But then after that, they won some more, even won an NAIA, which is a much tougher competition than Division III. So he was able to prove that, you know, he was a good coach. And what was the old Bum Phillips saying that fits Jeff Hands? You know, he can beat yours with his'ns and his'ns with urines, and that's just, I think, you know, the future's really bright for NKU women's basketball, and you know, we'll all get to see it here with this student production
coming up.
Yeah, for sure.
Can't wait.
You know, you mentioned the West Virginia game for the men. I felt like Louisville had that moment with the women a few years later when they came up to Northern Kentucky and played a game here. And I know you have a story about that.
Well, we talk about the coaching tree, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's the whole thing. That was Nancy, you know, Wenstall. She's got a pretty big coaching tree, does she not?
No doubt.
Jeff Hands was on. He's got 2 branches on that tree. Right, but Coach Wall's down there, you know, who played for Kenny briefly, and of course, you know, his dad Roger was the AD over there at
Highlands.
And don't forget, his sister is probably one of the greatest high school basketball players in the history of the state. You know, Jamie Walls, almost 5,000 points,
right?
You know, over was it 5 or 6 varsity seasons, but still legit. And now she's the coach at Highlands,
right?
And of course, on the boys' side, it's Kevin Listerman, another NKU alum. It all comes back to that, you know. So yeah, I mean, but yeah, he definitely, you know. Jeff Walls brought his Louisville team up. It was an excuse to be in front of his family, to do a favor for NKU for sure. And you know, and now I guess Jeff is back on the program, on the schedule. I think they go down there, and then I don't know if they're going to return the trip up here or not. I'm sure that's something to be yet to be determined. But at least this year, you know, and it's a short trip, right?
Yeah, it's not bad.
Well, and you know, there was a player on that team that made that trip to the arena that day, and that was Lindsey Duval, who ended up at Northern Kentucky, and of course had a fantastic career, and now is the Dobo for Jeff Hands here,
director of basketball operations. And honestly, you know, we talk about great players. She's the greatest Division I player in the women's basketball program. It's just a shame they couldn't win more games, or she would get the recognition she deserves, because I think it's still Michelle Cottrell is the #1 all-time best player because of how decorated she was. She won a national championship. I'm not sure Melissa Wood gets the credit that she deserves because she predated television.
Right.
But those two were probably the greatest. And then Lindsey Duval's right in there too. Definitely the best Division I. And if she would have won more games, we'd probably be calling her. But she's definitely Hall of Fame caliber, and it's just a matter of when she's eligible to be a Hall of Fame member that she'll get in.
Well, and the game, her final game at Northern Kentucky, the Horizon League semifinal against Cleveland State that went to overtime, her duel with Destiny Leo was still the best game I've witnessed in person in my time doing games here. Just a back and forth between two players who just were not going to let their team lose that day, and somebody had to, and Leo ended up getting the better, and they moved on to the championship game. But, you know, Lindsey Duval, what she did for that team really took a team that probably had no business getting to Indianapolis and put the team on her back and got them there a couple of times, if I'm not mistaken, in that stretch. And if not for her, I don't think, and again, it all comes back around. She comes over from Louisville. Was that a, you know, hey, I think you should finish up here in Northern Kentucky. Maybe you should take a look at them, you know.
And there were players from her high school that played here as well. Kayla Thacker on the women's side. Now I know they didn't play together, but and the other one was Tyler Sharp. They all came from that. And then there was so many other great players that came out of that program. Another one that went to Bellarmine was Rusty Trotman, who's now married to Kayla Thacker, by the way. But so many great players that came from that Bull Ladies program, and those were in Derek Willis as well. Went to the University of Kentucky. I mean, so there was a ton of great players that come out of that program. And but Lindsay, 5 stars. That's what she was rated going to Louisville. Was able to get her degree from Louisville. This thing no one talks about. She got her degree from Louisville in like less than 3 years.
Yeah. Yep.
And was able to come here and have 3 years of eligibility after being down there for, I think, 3 seasons because she had a medical red shirt, one of them.
Had a red shirt, yeah.
And so, but she's just really special, but not real fast, not real big. But man, when everybody in the gym knows that team needs a bucket, that's the one that's getting it. Number 5 is the one that's getting it.
And Brady, she's still getting buckets.
Absolutely.
I just went to their practice last week, and she's still scoring against D1 basketball players.
I told her when she first took the job, I said, Lindsay, the only problem is if you're still the best player, we're not going to get to where we need to go.
Yeah, it's wild to continue to watch her. And 5-star human being, too. I mean, just a great ambassador for the university. But just a few other games of note. And obviously, I'm the third on the list as far as experience here of this group, but we saw a couple of them on the broadcast. Obviously, Molly Glick's 3. The win over Michigan in softball was such a big deal, just because Catherine Gleason, obviously went to Michigan. This was a chance for her to bring Michigan back in for an event. They win. They get to a regular season game. I know it doesn't have the same cachet as beating him in the NCAA tournament, but it was still quite the accomplishment.
Well, and that's just the thing. We're talking because it's dominated with basketball, but the student production has done many other games and many other sports between men's and women's soccer, volleyball. That was Bill Farrow on the call, by the way. We wait past the hour mark to give him the love that he used to call a lot of that stuff back in the day.
Wears a lot of hats.
Absolutely, and I know he filled in for me. I had to leave early a softball game that got delayed 2 hours, and he ended up calling the last. And that was last spring, by the way.
Bill can still get it done.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. But, I mean, there's just a ton of them. And you mentioned the COVID year. Obviously, you had the Sports Center highlight there. I was fortunate enough to call both Horizon League Championship games in soccer because they played in the spring of 21 because the season got postponed. Unfortunately, it didn't go well. The men lost, and then the women lost in penalties to Milwaukee, but still that was a really cool moment. But I mean, honestly, getting a chance to sit with you, because you talk about sitting with Don, you from the day I walked in to start doing this, like have helped me every step of the way. Here's what you need to do. Here's how you need to do it. And that doesn't happen everywhere, and maybe it is because you had people doing the same.
Well, that's
thing
because I stole all of Don Weber's material. They're all his stories.
Hey, but it works.
But the only original stories I have are the lies I made up.
But I just pass those stories on to somebody else. We just
they're borrowed. Everything's borrowed. Nothing's original. I mean, I've used this many times. Well, for Jim Frochuber said when we went to one of those Hall of Fame things, hey, people pay attention. A lot of stories are going to be told, and some of them will be true. And then there's the other famous one as far as when you steal from one person, it's plagiarism, but when you steal from a group of people, it's research.
I like that.
Those are all real facts.
So I guess as we start getting close to wrapping this thing up, because Bill probably wants to go home at some point this evening.
Hey, this was his idea, so now he's on punishment.
He is. But
and thank you for that, Bill, letting us go down memory lane, man.
That's
right. As you look back, obviously 30 years as we get to this November, what's kind of your takeaway over this era? Obviously, you got us started in the 30 years. Brady, came in to work with you, and then end up kind of taking the mantle as the lead broadcaster. And I've come in here last. But starting with Don, what do you kind of take away from this 30-year period of student productions here at Northern Kentucky?
I mean, I think everything's grown up. I think if you looked at these productions 30 years ago and you look at them today, far superior. You got better equipment. I think the students, but I think the students always did a good job. I think you did, you worked with what you had and made the best of it. And I think that has been one of the keys. I don't think any student that worked on a production here at NKU, even 30 years ago, said, all right, you know what, we're we're just NKU. We'll just if it looks okay, fine. We're not. I think they wanted to produce the best quality that they could, and which is a great attribute to have, and you carry that into your professional life. When you do stuff. I mean, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that it did. Now for NKU Athletics, certainly made them more visible. In every aspect. I mean, because it was a school that still wasn't on television for the most part. But then when you guys did it, had the games on our channel. Now you're on ESPN, and we're getting a lot of so it allows people from all over to watch. I think that's it legitimizes your program. Not that it wasn't legitimate to begin with, but it really does. It comes down to and I think on students' resumes, hey, I did this production on ESPN. It's an ESPN production. There's no lie to that. I mean it isn't. It aired on ESPN, so that's a great thing to have for a college student. And it's quality. I mean like I say, I'll put these some of these games up against some of the ones that I've watched, and sometimes I don't know. I guess they're scattered kind of thin around the country because some of them aren't very good, frankly, and yet with NKU, I think there's always pretty good effort in them, and I say it's a win-win for everybody. Win-win for athletics, definitely win-win for the production of NKU, and I think a win for just NKU for allowing to have a program like this that does that, because it probably doesn't happen at every school. Now, it happens at other schools. I've seen a few of them on some of the ESPN Plus, and they're not very good. I don't know. You can't sugarcoat something if it isn't, just not very well done. Here, I believe they are. So that's good. That's a great asset to have. Good things.
Some of the students we've worked with, I know all three of us have gone on to do big things or working for the big networks, doing all this other stuff.
Oh, they've eclipsed anything I've ever done, and this is a great spot to be in.
Yes,
but then the reality of it is, I'm still there, and they moved on.
It shows.
But this is the place I want to be, though.
Yeah,
and it was always because I always wanted to be here. I was a non-traditional student when I started into this stuff, and a big part of it was watching Don's show, and then the sports page on ICN 6 or TKR or whatever entity it was,
whatever 8 or 9
names, right? Whatever
it was for that
whatever
year.
the cable company was called at the time. But I was like, that's what the whole high school football, the whole high school sports thing, and NKU and Thomas More was included into that. And then when I get to college here, I find out in one of my first classes, Wes Akers is asking for volunteers to sign up to be on the production team for an NKU game that's going to be on ICN 6. And I'm like, well, sign me up, man. Yeah. Here we are. We're and that's, I don't know if students understand that coming in, but eventually they do.
Yeah.
And I guess because I was older, I appreciated it more right away. But the opportunity you have of hands-on experience, and you can get a job anywhere in this industry. Learning, especially if you learn the production stuff, man, and it's all at your fingertips as long as you apply yourself here and be a part of it. And it isn't even just the sports things they do. The media services crew, you see them everywhere, all the press conferences and stuff they do around campus, like when they've introduced new coaches or athletic directors. That's Bill and his crew putting everything all together. Graduations, all that kind of stuff. And, the basketball and the sports here in the athletic department are just a small part of it. It's just, again, it's kind of the bell cow. It's what everybody recognizes, and it's a fantastic opportunity. And it's hard to believe it's already been 30 years, and hopefully we're still strong enough to do 30 more. God forbid that any of us will be still around for that, right? I'm just hoping I'm here for November 3rd when we have our first game coming up.
Of the season.
Against UC Claremont.
Exactly.
I'm very fortunate as well. I was non-traditional, and Wes, I went to Wes when I was leaving and said, hey, let them know if they need somebody to fill in. And I started filling in on soccer broadcast, and the rest is history. But one other guy I want to shout out personally is Brad Pope, who's now back at the University of Memphis. But Brad was here doing the all the media stuff. And he was one, I walked in his office and he was the one that gave me that first soccer game. Like, hey, can you do soccer? Of course I said yes. I'd never called play-by-play for soccer. I did PA. I watched soccer. But, you know, when somebody offers you an opportunity, you say yes, and you figure it out later. And you know, the rest is history. But
and there's so many people that we haven't mentioned that we should. You know, just in that opening segment. You know, the very first game in 1995. That was Steve Hensley, who ended up being 2 stints here as a broadcaster, but also longtime football coach and athletic director. You and I talked about it.
Yeah.
He went to Ludlow High School and snapped what was it, 33
game
losing streak, and then went over to Taylor High School, and I think he did something similar over there. When he was there, I think it wasn't 33 games, but it was like 15, 18, and then got in administration after that. Eventually was a long-time athletic director at Campbell County High School, and his partner, the female voice, Tracy Purser, who, of course, a lot of people who know, the daughter of the late, great Gary Burbank.
Former intern of mine as well.
Another former intern of yours.
Yeah, Tracy.
And she's a professor here,
Right.
And and then of course Wes was one of your interns.
It's good to see, though. It's good to see that they stayed in it, and
then there were a couple of other ones. Yeah, I don't want to start naming people's names because I wasn't for sure if they went through the ICN 6 tree, but yeah, there were other ones for sure that went and did it for a while, got in the business, and then realized, well, I could probably make better money doing this other thing, you know, or somewhere better.
Yeah.
But I know that you've had other interns that came through our program as well. And then there's other ones, even the ones we brought in from the outside, talent-wise. I worked a long time with Brad Redford, who's now a sports agent now, the Xavier Sharpshooter.
Yes, indeed.
Your guy, Rich Hoyt, a longtime coach in the area. He had come here from being a head coach at Summit Country Day, where he coached Kevin Johnson, who went to UC, and now he's over in the Covington Catholic coaching staff, and so many other ones. And then there was other ones that just kind of came in for ins and outs. Guy you work with, John Kirtley, came through. I did a few games. I did a few games with John in the very, very early going
stages.
Scott Borders.
Scott, absolutely,
is another one.
Those
I know
were the 2 main guys I worked with here.
Sure, and then of course you had Don Owen, who was a sports information director in the beginning. I mean, without his we couldn't really done any of this.
Right.
And so many other ones. I know I'm going to leave some people out.
I know.
But those are ones I definitely got to jump into. And then in the modern day, with Drew McDonald and David Wassler, working with those 2 guys, go from players to. And I recognize both those guys had a chance to do this if they really wanted to, and they reached out and asked for the opportunity. It's like kind of a no-brainer, to bring the greatest player of all time in here, right? Drew McDonald there. Real quick, greatest men's player of all time.
Oh, my goodness.
There's so many of them, too. I mean, with women, you can narrow it down.
Oh, gosh.
Because there were so many good ones. I know Drew was the all-time leading scorer in Division I. It's him or Quez.
Right.
1A.
One of those 2. Yes.
Marquez work if you weren't paying attention.
And I think if you're in Division II, I mean, Stephen Wright was only there a year.
Correct. But he had the greatest 1 year in Division II.
Right. But I mean, you had.
Now, Ken Shields says his best player he ever coached, period, was LaRon Moore.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And that goes back to his Highlands days. He coached Scott Dowd.
He did.
And he said, now Scott Dowd's on that starting 5.
Right. LaRon was a fantastic player.
LaRon Moore
he was solid.
Was he probably the best one?
Really good player, and but just so many great memories.
Best car salesman, is it Paul Cluxton or Mike Kelsey? Because they're together now.
Paul Cluxton.
He did make all those free throws. But now they're in business together because they're in-laws.
It's kind of neat to see them.
Well, Paul Cluxton married Katie Kelsey, and 2 of their daughters are on the volleyball team right now.
Who are in first place in the
Horizon League. Shout out to Liz Holmes, by the way.
Yes.
Liz Hart. She's the greatest volleyball player of all time. I don't think it's ever.
Now the greatest coach, too.
And now the greatest coach.
Isn't it a weird feeling, though, when you see, I think like Drew McDonald, and Christy Freppen played his mom.
Correct.
And it's okay. I saw her as a player at Newcath, covered her as a player at Newcath, then at Northern, and then Drew was kind of right at the end of as far as in high school when I was. It's like, okay, now he's out of college. It's like, okay, what's that say about me?
I'm just glad to still be around to talk about it.
That's what you do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I won't worry about my age. I am glad I'm still here to talk about it and talk to you great guys here tonight.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. We've relived a lot of great times, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again somewhere down the road.
That'd be great, yeah.
Don, Brady, as always, it's great to get a chance to chat NKU history with both of you, and really appreciate you joining us tonight.
I'm just glad to be invited and to spend one more night with one of my mentors there, Don Weber.
Always a pleasure to come here on the NKU campus. It's been a while since I've been on the campus, and my goodness, how it has grown. It's like, okay, I know where this building is, but I don't remember all these other buildings being here.
They squeezed them all in, dropped them out of the sky.
They sure
right?
did. No, it's great. Beautiful area, beautiful campus, and certainly always a pleasure to come back here.
That's going to wrap things up for this, our 30-year celebration. Big thanks to everybody for putting us together and letting us have a chance to talk about this. Of course, you can catch all of our NKU broadcasts on ESPN Plus throughout the season. We look forward to being out at the fields and the courts throughout the rest of the year to bring you the best in Northern Kentucky athletics. For Don Weber and Brady Laber, and for Bill Farrow, who's on the other side of this wall having to listen to all this, I'm Matt Sexton saying so long. We'll see you out at the games.